Nice uniform, my cousin Zach laughed. Does she even know how to load a weapon? The people at the table giggled. Someone muttered something under their breath, and my uncle smirked without looking at me. I stood quietly, still holding my jacket, pretending not to hear. But I heard every word. I always did. Then the double doors opened. General Harding stepped into the room, eyes scanning the crowd. He stopped when he saw me and spoke without hesitation. Commander Sandoval, he said. The room is ready. We're waiting on your briefing. Zach nearly fell off his chair. My uncle stared down at his empty plate, and I stood up. My name is Lara Sandoval. I'm 33, and I serve in the U.S. Army as a commander in military intelligence. I've been in the service for over a decade. I've completed 2 overseas deployments, led dozens of missions, and trained some of the sharpest analysts I've ever met. But none of that mattered in the room I walked into that day, because to them, my own family, I was still just Lara. The quiet one. The girl who wore too much green. The niece who ran off to play soldier. It was a Saturday afternoon at a private country club outside Richmond. My Uncle Vince had rented out the space to celebrate my cousin Zach's promotion. Something about sales and numbers and regional executive something. I came because my mother asked me to. She said it would mean a lot to the family. She said, just come for an hour and try not to argue with anyone. I told her I'd do my best. I arrived in uniform. Not to show off, not to make a statement. I had come straight from base. I was scheduled to brief a visiting unit later that day, and this brunch was supposed to be a quick stop. I walked in quietly, greeted the server at the door, and found my mother sitting near the center table. I barely had time to take off my jacket before Zach noticed me. Nice uniform, he said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Does she even know how to load a weapon? People laughed. Some gave me side glances. A few looked embarrassed but didn't say anything. My Uncle Vince chimed in from his seat. Back in my day, you had to actually fight to earn that thing. He nodded toward the patch on my sleeve. More chuckles. No one defended me. My mom looked away. I sat down quietly. I didn't explain myself. I didn't list my deployments or medals or years of training. I didn't talk about the lives I helped protect or the briefings I had written that were later used by field units overseas. I didn't bring up how I was one of the youngest women in my division to reach my rank, because none of that mattered. To them. I was still just Lara who joined the army. That's what they called it. Like I had signed up for a part-time job at a gas station instead of a full-time career in national defense. I've never been the loud one. I don't talk much at family gatherings. I don't show pictures or wear my rank like a badge at Thanksgiving. I've always believed in doing the work and letting the results speak for themselves, but sitting at that table, listening to Zach mock my career while the rest of them laughed like it was just a harmless joke, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of being dismissed. Tired of pretending it didn't hurt. I glanced at my phone and saw a new message pop up. Conference room is ready. General's on his way. See you in 10. I locked the screen, stood up, and pushed in my chair. No one asked where I was going, and that was fine, because they were about to find out. As I stepped out of the dining room and into the hallway, I finally let my shoulders drop. The polished floor, the dim lighting, even the silence felt like a break from the noise behind me. I pulled my phone from my pocket and double-checked the time. 10 minutes until the briefing. I had just enough time to get my head right back. In the banquet room, no one noticed I had left. Or if they did, they didn't care. They had already decided who I was before I walked in. I'd felt that judgment before, at other family events, reunions, weddings, holidays. But this time hit differently. Maybe it was because I was in uniform. Maybe it was because I had been up since 4 that morning, working, coordinating, managing a team of people who actually did value me. Maybe I was just done pretending. I leaned against the wall, letting the cool air from the hallway vent calm the fire building in my chest. I wasn't going to let it shake me. I had dealt with tougher rooms. I had stood in front of field commanders, advisors, and visiting diplomats. I had briefed classified operations to men twice my age who didn't believe I belonged, until they read the documents I'd written and followed the plans I had helped build. I had earned my place 100 times over, but somehow, the one group of people I never got through to was my own family. Growing up, no one expected much from me. I wasn't loud like Zach. I didn't chase business or law or medicine like my other cousins. I was the kid who read books, went on long runs alone, helped around the house without being asked. My Uncle Vince always said, "She's too soft for the real world." I heard that more times than I could count. When I enlisted at 21, he called it a phase. My mother told me not to take it personally. "That's just how he is," she'd say. But I did take it personally. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he looked at me, like I'd thrown my life away by choosing a path he didn't respect. Over the years, I stopped trying to prove anything to him. I thought maybe time would change things. That if I stayed steady and did the work, they'd eventually see me differently. But here I was, more than a decade later, still being mocked at a lunch table like a joke. I straightened my uniform and headed toward the briefing room. It was just 2 doors down. Our unit had booked it in advance. It was quiet, private, and had the equipment we needed. The general would be arriving with 2 other officers, and I was responsible for delivering the operational overview. We were preparing for a collaborative training session with a nearby Air Force unit, and I'd spent the past 2 weeks gathering data, mapping potential weaknesses, and refining our security simulations. None of that mattered to Zach, of course. To him, I wore a uniform and probably just filed paperwork. I reached the room and opened the door. A junior officer was already inside, arranging a laptop and organizing folders. He glanced up when he saw me. "You're early, Commander." "Just needed some air," I said. I took a deep breath and scanned the setup. Everything was in order. Slides ready, seats lined up, documents printed and clipped. My heart rate slowed as I returned to the space I belonged in, where people expected something of me. Where my role wasn't a costume but a responsibility. I checked my notes one more time, reviewed the outline in my head, and prepared to do what I always did: lead with focus, deliver with clarity, and not waste a second proving anything to anyone. And then, through the small glass window in the door, I saw General Harding step into the main lobby. He was right on time, wearing his dress blues. His presence always shifted the atmosphere. He didn't need to say much. His posture, his eyes, his quiet command, it all spoke for itself. He nodded when he saw me through the glass. I gave a nod back, then he did something unexpected. He paused at the doors to the dining room, the same doors I had walked through 20 minutes earlier, the same ones behind which my uncle and cousin were probably still chatting about things that didn't matter. He turned the handle and opened the door. I stood frozen for a moment. I knew what was about to happen, but I didn't expect it to come this soon, and as I walked toward him, I heard the room fall quiet. The air shifted the moment General Harding opened that door. 1 second, the dining room was filled with casual conversation and the clinking of glasses. The next, it was still, like someone had dropped a curtain. You could feel the energy pull back, like the room itself knew something important was about to happen. He didn't speak right away. He scanned the room with calm authority, the way only someone with his presence could. Everyone looked up, and I saw expressions change from casual to curious, then confused. Zach, mid-laugh, slowly lowered his fork. My uncle leaned back in his chair, furrowing his brow as if trying to figure out what a 4-star general was doing in their private brunch. Then General Harding's eyes landed on me. "Commander Sandoval," he said, clearly and without hesitation. "The room is ready. We're waiting on your briefing." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Like it was normal to interrupt a family gathering and ask for a commander's attention in front of a room full of people who just assumed I didn't belong. I stood without a word. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. I didn't look around for approval. I just stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked past the people who had laughed at me not even 30 minutes earlier. Zach nearly dropped his drink. I caught his stunned expression just before I passed his table. His eyes bounced between me and the general, searching for some explanation that made sense to him. He didn't find one. My uncle didn't say anything. He kept his eyes on the linen napkin in his lap, as if he could pretend he hadn't said what he said earlier. My mother looked at me as I passed. There were tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of something quieter, heavier. Pride, maybe. Or relief. Or guilt for not speaking up. But this wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. I walked beside General Harding as we returned to the conference room down the hall. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. His presence next to me was statement enough. As we stepped into the room, 2 junior officers stood and nodded. The projector was ready, my presentation open, the chairs set in a semicircle for the seated briefing. I stepped to the front, took a deep breath, and began the screen behind me filled with diagrams and photos, maps, threat analysis charts, operational zones. I explained current Joint Task Force logistics, surveillance patterns, and intelligence gaps. I reviewed personnel assignments and outlined critical timelines for the upcoming training simulation. I pointed out weak links we'd flagged during prior assessments and suggested new strategies for high-value target protection. The general listened carefully. He didn't interrupt once. Neither did anyone else in the room. In this space, no one questioned why I was leading. They didn't care that I was quiet or that I didn't come from a military family of high ranks. They didn't care that I was a woman or that I didn't brag about medals. All they cared about was whether I had the answers. And I did. This was where I belonged. When I finished, there was a moment of quiet, not hesitation, but absorption. Then General Harding stood up and said simply, "Excellent work, Commander." That meant more to me than a dozen handshakes or applause ever could. I collected my notes and stepped back from the podium. My heart wasn't racing anymore. I felt calm, grounded, certain. I didn't need anyone's validation. But I had earned something better, respect. And not because I demanded it, but because I had shown up and done the work that mattered. As the general dismissed the team, one of the officers approached me on the way out. "You handled that like clockwork," he said. "Your family must be proud." I smiled politely but didn't answer. I didn't feel the need to explain that pride doesn't always come easily, especially from people who don't understand you. When the last officer left the room, I lingered for a moment. I looked down at the clicker in my hand, then back at the empty chairs. I had spent so many years shrinking myself to fit their expectations, thinking it was easier to stay quiet than to make them uncomfortable with the truth of who I was. But this time, I didn't shrink. I stood in my full height, in the uniform I had earned, doing the job I had built through hard choices and years of commitment, and I didn't do it to prove anyone wrong. I did it because I finally understood that some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be seen. I stepped out of the conference room feeling clear, like something heavy had finally shifted inside me. The hall was quiet again, the hum of the vents the only sound I expected. The moment to feel louder, like some dramatic shift would echo through the building. But real change is quiet. And this one had started with just 2 words, Commander Sandoval. I didn't head back into the banquet right away. I thought about slipping out through the main doors and calling it a day. I had done what I came to do. I had shown up for my duty, given my briefing, held my ground. But something made me stop in the hallway. I wasn't done yet. I turned and walked back toward the banquet room. Not to make a scene or to look for attention, but because I realized I had left in silence, and for once, I didn't want to. When I stepped back inside, heads turned. It was like walking into a completely different room. The energy had changed. The loud laughter had faded into hushed murmurs. Eyes followed me, but not in the mocking way they had earlier. There was confusion now, curiosity, and something else I couldn't quite name, but it wasn't dismissal. My mother stood near the corner, her hands clasped, watching me. She gave me a small nod. I nodded back. I didn't speak to anyone right away. I just returned to the seat I had left earlier. My water glass was still half full. The condensation had left a ring on the white linen. I sat down and took a sip, the cold grounding me. Zach was across the table, his expression blank. He kept shifting in his chair like he wasn't sure if he should say something or just pretend nothing had happened. That was his go-to, pretend, perform, move on. But this time, there was nowhere to move. He finally leaned forward slightly. "You're a commander?" It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't even skeptical. It was soft, unsure. "Yes," I said. He blinked. "Like, actual military commander?" I held his gaze. "That's right." He looked down, then back up. "I didn't know." I nodded. "You didn't ask." That hit harder than I expected it to. Not just for him, but for me too. Because that was the truth. No one ever asked. They didn't want to know who I was beyond what they assumed. And I had let them do it. For years. I didn't need to list my achievements. I didn't pull out stats or records. I didn't need to say anything more. The briefing, the general, the silence in the room, it had all spoken for me. Uncle Vince stayed quiet the whole time. He hadn't looked at me since I walked back in. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he was angry. I didn't care. His opinion didn't weigh the same anymore. The room slowly resumed conversation, but it was different now. Softer. More careful. No one made jokes. No one tossed out dismissive comments. My uniform, once a target, now stood for something they hadn't expected, and couldn't ignore. Later, after most of the guests had filtered out, my mom walked up beside me. She touched my shoulder gently. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything earlier," she said. "I should have." I looked at her and gave a tired smile. "It's okay." "No," she said. "It's not. But I'm proud of you. I always have been." That meant more to me than anything else said that day. We walked out of the banquet room together. The sky was starting to shift into late afternoon, with streaks of light pushing through the clouds. It was warm, quiet, calm. As we reached the parking lot, Zach jogged over, still unsure of himself. "Lara," he said. "Look." I was out of line. I stopped. Waited. He looked down at the gravel, then back at me. "You don't need my respect. I know that. But for what it's worth, you have it." I nodded once. "Thank you." I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't promise to forget. But I appreciated the effort. Not for what it fixed, but for what it acknowledged. Some moments change everything. Not because someone says the perfect thing, or because the crowd claps. But because the truth finally lands, and it stays there. That day, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand anything. I showed up. I did my job. And the people who thought they knew me finally saw what they had refused to believe for years. I was the same person I had always been. They just finally opened their eyes. The drive back to base was quiet. I didn't turn on music. I didn't check my phone. I just let the road stretch out in front of me while the day settled in my chest. It wasn't just what had happened, it was how it had made me feel. Like I'd finally walked through a door I'd been standing outside of for years, only to realize the lock had never actually been there. I had just never tried to open it. I thought about that moment in the dining room, when General Harding said my name, Commander Sandoval, with such clarity and purpose. That single line erased every joke, every dismissive look, every shallow comment I had heard over the years. But what struck me the most wasn't the look on my cousin's face, or the silence that followed. It was how steady I felt. Not smug. Not triumphant. Just, hold on. I parked outside the barracks and turned off the engine, sitting for a while with my hands resting on the steering wheel. My uniform still held the shape of the long day. My notes from the briefing were tucked in the passenger seat. Everything around me looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. For years, I had played small at family gatherings. I avoided conflict, brushed off comments, smiled politely when they asked if I was still doing the army thing. I let them misinterpret my silence as weakness, because I thought peace was more important than clarity. But peace without honesty isn't peace, it's just quiet disappointment. And I was done carrying that. I walked into my room, hung up my uniform, and sat on the edge of my bed. I looked around at the things that made up my life, photos of my team, a folded flag from my first deployment, my field journal, my boots lined up neatly near the door. These were the things no one at that brunch had ever asked about. They had no idea what I carried, what I'd done, or who I was beneath the surface. They never asked, and I never offered, but after today, I knew I didn't need their permission to be proud. My mother texted me later that night. She didn't say much, just sent a photo of us from earlier that day. I hadn't realized anyone took one. In the photo, I was standing in uniform, arms at my side, looking directly into the camera. Her caption was only 3 words, "That's my daughter." It wasn't loud, but it meant everything. I didn't hear from Zach. I didn't expect to. And I didn't need to. His silence said enough. Sometimes people don't apologize with words, they do it with space, with quiet shifts in behavior. I could live with that. What mattered was that I no longer felt the need to explain myself to him, or anyone else in that room. I went back to work the next day, same routine, same pace. The people around me saw me as they always had, Commander Sandoval. My title had never changed. My role hadn't shifted. The only difference was that I finally stopped separating the person I was at work from the person I became around family. There's a strange kind of strength that grows in silence. It's not the same as bitterness or pride. It's not about proving someone wrong. It's about finally seeing yourself clearly, even when others don't. And once you do, there's no going back. I realized something else that day. Some people will never know your worth because they only see the version of you that fits their comfort. They remember who you were at 12, or what you wore to a holiday dinner 10 years ago, or how you once chose a path they couldn't understand. They shrink you down so they don't have to grow up, but you don't have to stay in that version. You can choose to walk into a room, stand tall, speak your name with pride, and let the truth introduce you. That's what I did. I didn't give a speech. I didn't ask for attention. I didn't demand respect. I earned it. Quietly, consistently, fully, and when the moment came, I let it speak for itself. That's what I hope someone else takes from this. That your story doesn't need a stage or a spotlight. It needs you, to keep going, to stay grounded, to hold your head up even when no one else sees the weight you carry, because one day, they will, and when they finally see who you are, let them be the ones who go silent, not you. You've already said enough just by being who you are.